Good afternoon, I'm Bakhtiar Sonova and you're watching A News. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. Donald Trump says he intends to meet with Vladimir Putin as soon as next week. Protesters in Israel marched through Tel Aviv demanding return of hostages. The US President Donald Trump to host Armenia-Azerbaijan peace talks on Friday. US President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that he could personally meet Russian President Vladimir Putin very soon. Trump's announcement follows what he called great progress made during his special envoy Steve Witkoff's talks with the Russian leader earlier yesterday. It will be the first US-Russia leadership summit since former President Joe Biden met with his counterpart in Geneva in June 2021.
Talks to stop the war in Ukraine between US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Russian President Vladimir Putin were good, according to US President Donald Trump on Wednesday. And now, Trump says there's a good chance he will meet the Russian leader soon, possibly as soon as next week. However, he gave no indication where the meeting might take place.
We haven't determined where, but we had some very good talks with President Putin today, and there's a very good chance that we could be ending the end of that road. That road was long and continues to be long, but there's a good chance that there will be a meeting very soon.
President Trump also discussed a potential summit when he called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to a senior source in Kyiv, the high-level meeting will include European leaders too.
European leaders were also on the call. I am grateful to each of them for their support. We discussed what was said in Moscow. It appears that Russia is now more inclined to consider a ceasefire. The pressure on them is working. But the main thing is to make sure they don't deceive anyone in the details, neither us nor the United States.
However, despite the talks, heavy fighting continues across multiple fronts in Ukraine. Russia claimed on Wednesday that its forces had launched coordinated strikes on several Ukrainian targets, including natural gas transmission systems. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, troops advanced deeper into Ukrainian defensive lines, clashing with Ukrainian forces and destroying tanks and drone warehouses. The ministry also reported that 51 Ukrainian drones were intercepted and shot down over regions including Rostov and Bryansk Oblasts in Russia. Meanwhile, Ukraine's armed forces reported 143 combat clashes in frontline areas. Ukrainian troops struck Russian command posts and artillery systems, signaling continued resistance despite diplomatic activity behind the scenes. Tensions also escalated near the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. No casualties were reported, and radiation levels reportedly remain within normal limits. The plant's administration condemned the attack, while Ukraine has yet to comment on the allegations. The ongoing military operations comes as President Trump's deadline for deciding on fresh sanctions against Russia looms, unless a ceasefire is agreed.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin says talks between President Vladimir Putin and US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff were useful and constructive. That's according to Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov, who took part in the 3-hour-long conversation. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova has more from Moscow.
Moscow says President Putin and US envoy Steve Witkoff discussed two topics during their talks in the Russian capital on Wednesday: the Ukrainian crisis and the prospect for the development of a strategic partnership between Russia and the United States. The meeting lasted for around 3 hours and comes ahead of a Friday deadline set by US President Donald Trump, calling for progress to be made towards peace in Ukraine or face further sanctions. Ushakov added that Putin conveyed some signals to the United States on the Ukrainian issue. Corresponding signals were also received from President Trump. The Kremlin said it will release more information on what was discussed after Witkoff reports back to the US president. Another participant of the talks, Kirill Dmitriev, who heads Russian Direct Investment Fund, said on social media that dialogue will prevail after the negotiations concluded. The general consensus among Russian analysts is that in the face-to-face talks in Moscow, the sides discussed an air truce with Ukraine, an issue that was floated last week by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Moscow earlier said it was open to talks with Ukraine and warned against escalating tensions. Dasha Cherneshova in Moscow for A News.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that an upcoming visit from a top official at the International Atomic Energy Agency is not about inspections or checking Iran's nuclear facilities. Instead, it's just to talk about how the two sides can cooperate moving forward. He added that this is happening under Iranian law and relates to their peaceful nuclear activities. Addressing speculation about renewed talks with the United States, Araghchi said no meetings regarding negotiations have been finalized. He said that messages from Washington continue to reach Tehran, but stressed that any future negotiations would depend on Iran's interests. Dozens of hostage families marched through Tel Aviv demanding a deal to bring their loved ones home. Pressure grows amid Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to seize Gaza.
Hostage families took to the streets of Tel Aviv on Wednesday, demanding an immediate deal to bring the remaining captives home from Gaza. Some demonstrators attempted to push through the gates of the military headquarters before being stopped by police. There are still 50 hostages believed to be held by Hamas, with at least 20 thought to be alive. Public pressure has intensified after the recent release of disturbing videos showing two extremely emaciated captives.
We need your help to make this decision be made right now. We need your help that this time all 50 hostages will be released, because a month later, just a year ago, my family member was executed by Hamas terrorists. She did nothing wrong. She had dreams to fulfill. She had a family who's mourning. Evyatar's family, Rom's family, can still get Evyatar and Rom back.
We're especially desperate at the moment. Tomorrow the cabinet is meeting, not to discuss how quickly they can return our hostages, not to discuss how dire is their situation after we've seen them starved and skeletal, but rather to discuss the Prime Minister's plan to occupy Gaza even further and to continue with the war.
Efforts to broker a ceasefire in Qatar collapsed last month. Hamas is demanding a permanent end to the war as part of any deal. Israel, meanwhile, accuses the group of trying to hold on to power and says its military campaign must continue. After meeting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday, opposition leader Yair Lapid said he had urged Netanyahu to reconsider, warning that public support for the war was fading and that a full military takeover would be a serious mistake.
As tensions surge over Gaza, Israel's political and military leadership appear deeply divided over the path forward. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly pushing for a total military takeover of the Strip, despite internal dissent, not only from opposition leaders, but from his own army chief. At the heart of the debate, whether such an operation can bring security, free hostages, or risks plunging the region into deeper chaos. Meanwhile, opposition figures like Yair Lapid argue that the Israeli public no longer supports this war, raising critical questions about legitimacy, strategy, and political survival. To help us unpack the political, humanitarian, and regional implications, we are joined now from Ankara by Melih Demirtaş, a former Turkish diplomat. Mr. Demirtaş, welcome to the program and thank you for joining at such a critical moment.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Demirtas, let's begin with public opinion in Israel. Opposition leader Yair Lapid says the people of Israel are not interested in this war. Based on what we have seen, do you think that's true?
I think that's true. I think we already seen that the public opinions started to be maybe much more in favor of some humanitarian solutions in all the region. Because when it started just after 7th October, the events like this 9/11 of America, we can say that 9/11 of Israel is 7th October, and now it turns to be a symbolic, of course, turning point for Israeli history. But still, this turning point is used, I think, such devastating, is such in a destructive manner by Netanyahu government and by the far rightist, actually, ministers. And now public opinion in Israel slowly lost their hopes for more diplomacy. And Mr. Netanyahu already showed that he's not a good diplomat. We are sorry to see every day, just every step, Mr. Netanyahu takes another harsh and military and much more maybe destructive step in the name of not in a humanitarian sense, but anti-humanitarian and much more in a destruction manner in the region. We can say, yes, it's the reason of maybe Hamas bureaucracy. We can say that Hamas has also some failures in putting some decisions into the reality. But still, that doesn't mean that full occupation of Gaza can be legitimized in one decision, in one maybe Knesset, in parliament decision of Israel. It only means much more destruction. It only means also the safety of the remaining hostages will be taken to the risk.
Mr. Demirtas, critics say Netanyahu is prolonging the war for political survival, fearing he may lose his governing coalition if the fighting stops. Do you see political self-interest driving the current military calculus?
In the democracy theories, and it's an important question, thank you, in this political science scholars, experts, they all know that in every democracy, through the history, we have such important failures, gaps in this democracy, if it is misled, if it is governed by these politicians, by decision takers in the name of some maybe unilateral decisions or unilateral sakes. Throughout the history, unfortunately, I must give this example, but the first example, of course, the Germany. The Germany from 1920s, 30s, till the end of this, of course, Nazi time, we can say that it's once also a democratic country. But how this democratic procedure is used in one country, in one party state, to another direction, we already see in the European history, but in many parts of this world politics, we already seen that this democracy can mean destruction of the other side, of the destruction of the neighbor countries, of neighbor communities. Unfortunately, Mr. Netanyahu, although Israel has some important, of course, democratic traditions, we also believe that some parties, some civil society organizations, also please take care about this last explanations of politicians, former foreign minister, former prime minister of Israel. They already declared so openly that Mr. Netanyahu in his far rightist maybe supporters in his government, they really take wrong steps, especially in this time, especially in this period. And yes, the democracy now works, unfortunately, in Israel, not in favor of humanitarian solutions.
So militarily, Israel now controls about 75% of Gaza, but the vast majority of Gaza's civilians remain in the remaining 25%. Is Israel realistically prepared to assume full responsibility for governing and providing for nearly 2 million Palestinians?
Unfortunately, this responsibility issue is not in the same baskets of this Israeli politics as actually in this last 2 years. If we maybe take into account all these actions of Israel, of course, we already seen that Israel military is so capable, quote unquote, in using some weapons, in using some very destructive weapons and full technological weapons inside the country. Actually think about Hamas, of course, capabilities. It's an organization. Of course, for some Western commentators, for some Western scholars, it's a terrorist organization. In my country, in Turkey, of course, we do not accept officially such an explanation. It is still under discussion. But to define terrorism or to define anti-terrorism, it's also a topic of hot discussion still in the politics. But still, this 25% of Gaza is still maybe turned into a graveland, turned to maybe a big cemetery of many people killed. Because of, I always call this in my also scholarly articles or maybe declarations, that is like a post-modern genocidal condition. Because post-modern, because all the media tactics, all this tactic of starvation, famine, also banishment to these international organizations, members, first of all, United Nations, and all this maybe elements are maybe included in this Israeli politics of, unfortunately, post-modern genocidal condition in Palestine. This 25% must be rescued, first of all, by the international organizations, and first of all, by the United Nations, and we must, actually, international community must maybe show international conscience, and it must stop maybe Israel to maybe have this full-scale invasion, which can happen in very short time.
Melih Demirtas, thank you very much for your time and insights. We greatly appreciate your perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you also.
South Korea and the United States will begin their annual Ulchi Freedom Shield military drills on the 18th of August. The 11-day exercise has been partially rescheduled, with half of the events moved to September due to the extreme weather. Officials say the drills will focus on upgraded responses to North Korea's nuclear threats and modern warfare scenarios. The exercise will simulate a North Korean missile launch, but not a nuclear test. Pyongyang has long criticized the drills as a provocation. Hawaii's Kilauea volcano erupted, sending lava fountains and rivers across the summit caldera. The eruption lasted several hours, with geologists collecting lava samples by helicopter. The United States Geological Survey confirmed a new fissure had opened, along with increased lava flow and minor earthquakes. Kilauea has shown intermittent activity since late 2024. It remains one of the world's most active volcanoes. Ali Larijani has returned to his former position as Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council nearly 18 years after his resignation during Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's presidency. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian appointed the veteran politician Ali Larijani as Secretary of the influential Supreme National Security Council in a development believed to further the president's moderate foreign policy by the pragmatic conservative figure. Turaj Shiralilo has more.
President Pezeshkian, in his assignment letter, reappointed Larijani, who is a moderate conservative and also a senior advisor to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, at the helm of the Supreme National Security Council, SNSC, which oversees and shapes Iran's foreign and security policy. Larijani first served as the SNSC Secretary from August 2005 to October 2007, and was Iran's chief negotiator with the European powers during his first term in the Council. The 67-year-old pragmatic politician held the key position of the director of the state-owned Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting, IRIB, for 10 years, from 1994 to 2004, and also served as the Speaker of Parliament of Iran from 2008 to 2020. However, he was disqualified from running for presidency campaign in 2021 and 2024. His reappointment at the crucial position in the country's national security architecture, following the two-time disqualification for running in presidential election, came days after the SNSC approved setting up the National Defense Council. The Defense Council, which was established under provisions of Article 176 of the Iranian Constitution, will be chaired by the President and was established to integrate armed forces decision-making in the wake of the 12-day U.S.-Israeli airstrikes against Iran in June. In recent days, news about Larijani's expected return to the realm of security and foreign policy were widely reported, after he paid a surprise visit to Moscow on 20th of July and met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Kremlin. Turaj Shiralilo, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
On Friday, U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled to hold separate meetings with the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Armenia, according to his official agenda released for the day. The Armenian Prime Minister's office has confirmed that Nikol Pashinyan will visit the United States on Thursday and Friday. A press release from the office stated that a trilateral meeting involving Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Donald Trump will also take place in Washington. The meeting is aimed at promoting peace, prosperity and economic cooperation in the region. With a new step toward long-term peace and unity, Turkey's parliament has launched the first meeting of a powerful new initiative, the National Solidarity, Brotherhood and Democracy Committee. Our Turkey correspondent Aliya Aziz reports.
Turkey is taking a landmark step in its internal security and political reconciliation with the formation of a powerful new parliamentary committee under the Terror-Free Turkey initiative. The newly established National Solidarity, Brotherhood and Democracy Committee, chaired by Parliament Speaker Numan Kurtulmuş, held its inaugural session at the Grand National Assembly on Tuesday. Describing it as a historic turning point, Kurtulmuş said the initiative aims to permanently end terrorism in Turkey by strengthening democratic institutions and rebuilding trust across all segments of society. The committee is tasked with drafting legal reforms, proposing political solutions, and promoting national unity, particularly among Turks, Kurds, and other ethnic communities affected by decades of conflict. It marks the first time Parliament has institutionalized such a broad-based political effort under the leadership of the Speaker's office, reflecting a shift away from purely security-based responses to terrorism. The body will operate until the end of 2025 with the ability to extend its mandate and will meet regularly to receive briefings from top security and intelligence officials. That begins this Friday when Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya, Defense Minister Yaşar Güler, and Intelligence Chief Ibrahim Kalin are expected to present updates on their respective institutions' counter-terror work. In the months ahead, the committee is expected to play a central role in shaping legislation aimed at securing long-term peace, protecting rights, and advancing what Kurtulmuş called a shared national future. For A News, this is Aliya Aziz, Istanbul, Turkey.
The Georgian Prime Minister says the country is on track to become one of the top 3 business-friendly nations globally. According to the World Bank's latest ranking, Irakli Kobakhidze says Georgia's regulatory reforms, low tax burden and strategic infrastructure projects are transforming it into a vital trade hub, linking Asia and Europe. Nini Nikolaishvili has more.
Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze has announced that Georgia is set to become one of the world's 3 business-friendly countries by 2024, according to the World Bank's latest Ready-to-Do Business ranking. Prime Minister Kobakhidze highlighted Georgia's ambitions to transform into a multifunctional hub that connects continents, markets, and ideas. In his address, Kobakhidze emphasized that Georgia's recognition as a global leader in regulatory quality, efficient public services, and low tax burdens reflects the years of consistent reforms. Currently, Georgia ranks first at the Rule of Law Index among the Eastern Europe and Central Asian states, in addition to boasting one of the lowest tax burden worldwide, under at 10%. Crucially, Kobakhidze underlined the importance of Georgia's infrastructure projects that strengthen the Middle Corridor, a key trade route connecting Asia to Europe. Developing projects of East-West Expressway, Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway, Anaklia deep water ports and dry ports are designed not only to enhance Georgia's connectivity, but also to reduce the transit costs and to open up new markets for the entire region. According to the Prime Minister, Georgia's goal is not just to become a transit country, but also to be an active regional player that is providing services such as warehousing, processing, and distribution. He called on international partners to deepen cooperation, positioning Georgia as a reliable and stable gateway for the landlocking nations that aims to have better access to the global markets. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
In a move signaling deepening regional cooperation, Afghanistan is strengthening its transport and transit ties with neighboring countries. Key developments this week highlight efforts to expand connectivity through road, rail and air opening new economic corridors across Central and South Asia. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more details from Kabul.
Afghanistan Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation Hamidullah Akhundzada met with Turdakun Seydikov, the Kyrgyz ambassador to Kabul, to discuss expanding bilateral transport links. Minister Akhundzada emphasized Afghanistan's full readiness to cooperate in both land and air transport, while Ambassador Seydikov said Kyrgyzstan is eager to deepen its connection with Kabul. Meanwhile, in Western Herat province, a Turkmen delegation led by Kurbanov Sardar, executive director of Turkmenistan's joint stock railway companies, met with Governor Nur Ahmad Islamjar to push forward the development of Turgundi port. The two sides agreed on the immediate construction of warehouses at the port, with Afghan workers leading the initial phase. Turkmen specialists will also be granted facilitated visas to support the project. In a separate development, Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev reaffirmed support for Uzbekistan-Afghanistan-Pakistan railway corridor. Speaking at a United Nations conference, he called the project a major step toward establishing a new economic space and reliable regional transport infrastructure. These efforts reflect growing momentum in regional connectivity, with Afghanistan emerging as a critical transit hub linking Central and South Asia. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.